Greetings from beautiful Thunk Studios. This is the Tesla News and Topics podcast for Sunday, October 7th, 2018.
I think we've got quite a lot of good news to talk about, and look forward to sharing that with you.
All right, welcome back, everybody. My name is Jeff, coming to you from beautiful Thunk Studios. This is the Tesla News and Topics podcast. This is actually episode 20, if you can believe it. So doing my best to try to keep up. Sorry this show is late, first of all. So let's just jump right to the news. A fairly eventful week, as you can imagine. Number one story for sure is Elon's $40 million tweet and the settlement with the Securities and Exchange Commission. As you may have heard already, Elon was sued by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Initially, the deal was that he was not going to be allowed to become a CEO or chairperson of any publicly traded company, and apparently that got sort of walked back to a settlement that allowed him to stay at Tesla. It sounded like at one point Elon Musk made an ultimatum to the board of directors of Tesla saying that if you guys don't back me, I'm going to quit immediately. And it sounded like shortly after that, they did sound a letter saying that they had full confidence in Elon and that he's done an amazing job building up the company to where it is now. And there's an article in the New York Times that references this as well. And this article was put out on October 2nd. Author here is James B. Stewart. And the title is Elon Musk's Ultimatum to Tesla, Fight the SEC or I Quit. So pretty clickbaity sort of title. Afterwards, Tesla sent out that statement saying that we're, quote, fully confident in Elon, his integrity, and his leadership of the company, end quote. And it sounded like eventually what happened was there was going to be a settlement. Elon managed to get them to reject the settlement, and then he ended up settling anyway. And the settlement, as you may have heard, was that Elon Musk personally has to pay a fine of $20 million. Tesla, the company, has to pay a fine of $20 million, and Elon Musk gets to continue as CEO, but cannot remain as chairperson or chairman of the board moving forward. So we did talk about that a little bit on last week's show. So pretty huge news there. The other thing that I think relates to this, which is pretty amazing, Elon actually did tweet out again. I think he called him the Short Sellers Enrichment Commission in a tweet. And the stock dropped again and spurred a number of other headlines after that saying that the board's got to get him under control, that the board has a difficult decision to make, et cetera, et cetera. So still lots of controversy and numerous people in the Tesla community imploring Elon to just basically knock it off. Just do not go there. Stay off your Twitter. Don't antagonize the SEC after you just made a settlement with them. It just doesn't seem, very smart. And obviously he's a bright person, but as we have discussed before, I'm a huge Tesla fan. I absolutely love my new Model 3. Love it, love it, love it. But that doesn't mean that there aren't still issues here that need to be addressed. And if we all want Tesla to succeed, I think this is an area that does need to be addressed. You just can't, in my opinion, just say, well, let Elon be Elon and do these things. I mean, it literally cost himself $20 million by his mishandling of this, and also $20 million out of what would have been revenue. How many cars they have to sell to make $20 million? I didn't do the math. I'm sure Teslanomics could crank that out in about 30 seconds, but needless to say, that's money that's just down the drain. If the quest is to be profitable, he just did something that puts that in some jeopardy, and he really needs to knock it off. Next story is, the next big one really, is that version 9 of the software is set for wide release. And I've seen lots of people, both in the Minnesota Tesla users Facebook page as well as the North Dakota Tesla users Facebook page, that are sort of seeing this roll out. Some of the folks are beta testers. Some of them have actually gotten the upgrade as an official public release. One thing I did notice right away, now I can't speak to this personally, but from what I saw on Facebook, there is an issue if you have a vertical screen Model X or Model S as opposed to the landscape orientation screen on the Model 3, that there may be some drawbacks here. in particular, it sounds like your ability to put something on the top half of the screen and then fix something on the bottom half of the screen is negatively impacted. And so I did see some people saying that they're not going to the version 9 releases just for that reason. So, keep that in mind if you are an S or an X user. Depending on how you use your screen, it may affect you quite a bit. But I think overall, there are a lot of other really neat features on this, including navigate on autopilot, the activation of the side cameras as well as the rear cameras, so that now the vehicle location screen, that little animation of your car with all the cars around it, will now be much more accurate and contain vehicles to your side and also behind you. Not only that, but these will now be rendered as more accurate to what they actually are. In other words, a motorcycle will be rendered as a motorcycle, a large truck will be rendered as a large truck, and cars will be, as they are. And this, I think, helps to fill a big spot. The Model 3, the one thing that it does not have is blind spot detection. I know other podcasters have talked about this, and as someone who's not a real Tesla fan, my wife, who really likes the car, that's the one thing that she noticed right away is, where's the blind spot detection? It's got all this amazing whiz-bang technology, and you're telling me my old van has blind spot detection and your Tesla doesn't? I think that's a fair criticism, but it's also being fixed, which is another very significant technology advantage that Tesla has, is that they can address things over the air, and they've up to this point been doing these sorts of upgrades at no additional cost to users. Those of you who have been listening to the show know what that means. It is time for your monthly Supercharger deadzone update. Sadly, I can report no changes at this time, although it does appear that there is some progress on the Alexandria, Minnesota Supercharger station, which originally was going to be next to a gas station, and it sounds like that spot just wasn't working out. From what I understand now, it's going to be located in the parking lot near the Target in Alexandria, and it sounds like it's probably going to move a little bit faster. I would still not hope for anything sooner than the spring of 2019. You never know, but I think it's going to take a little bit longer than that. And as far as I know, no changes on the permits in the 3 listed sites in North Dakota, which would be Fargo, Dickinson, North Dakota, and then I'm forgetting the name of the one way up north in North Dakota. Actually, it's Pembina, North Dakota. I just jumped away real quick. You probably couldn't tell, and you wouldn't have known unless I told you, like I just did, that I just paused the show, jumped on Google and found it. So Pembina, North Dakota, permit at 191 days. The permit in Fargo, I believe, is at the same time frame as well. And Dickinson, same story. So we'll keep waiting there. The other thing that potentially could be helpful here is it's called the ZEF network, the ZEF network. It's at zefenergy.com. And it sounds like what they do is they are covering Minnesota and Wisconsin through sort of an independent consortium. And they are supplying level 3 fast chargers. And it looks like their roadmap will essentially cover Fargo to Minneapolis very well. They're going to get Fargo, they're going to hit Fergus Falls, which is about 50 to 60 miles to the east. Then they're going to hit Alexandria, which is another 50 or 60 miles. Then I believe it is St. Cloud. There might be another one in there, but these are coming soon. These are also not available yet, but it sounds like this is going to be a non-Tesla solution that actually could be very workable for those of us that need to get, from Fargo to Minneapolis and back, especially when the cold weather hits. That drive, I think, from Clearwater to Fargo could be a challenge and certainly could cause some range anxiety without these extra stops. I think that'll be great, and hopefully we'll see those as well maybe next spring. And we'll move on to today's topic, which is basically Elon's $20 million tweet for him, total $40 million tweet between him and Tesla. But before we do that, I wanted to just quickly give you an update. Now that I am a proud Model 3 owner, just been incredibly happy with the car. I just can't tell you how much fun it is to drive. It's absolutely one of those things that you have to just experience it. I'm feeling very comfortable with the car. I'm really accustomed now to the regen braking. When I drive my other car, it's a little bit awkward, but the regenerative braking, I'm very used to it right now. I have noticed that if I put the car in chill mode, it feels a little bit more like a traditional car. Still pretty fun to drive, still plenty fast. When it's in standard mode, it's very zippy, very responsive. And if you're kind of an erratic driver, it actually is a little bit jerky because the car is just so fast, so fun to drive. The other day, I saw a Porsche 911 S Turbo pull out of the Costco and then just floor it out of the turn. And there was kind of an open area there. It didn't look like anything reckless, but I just saw them take off, which is kind of what I've been doing whenever I have a chance. I'm trying to just get up to the speed limit in that area as fast as I can. So I'm not actually speeding. I'm just driving really quick. And I turned the corner left, kind of heading the same way as them. And I was trying to get caught up with this 911 just to sort of see if I could get us stopped at a light together and maybe see how the non-performance Model 3 stacks up to a Porsche 911 S Turbo. But there's just too much traffic. I couldn't do it. So a couple other updates. The app just started working for me. It took a full 7 days after delivery of the vehicle for the app to start working. I had done many calls, was told many different things. So that process was honestly very frustrating. Just because I was told different things. And certainly at the time of delivery, no one told me it'll take a week. I think they said it might take a day or two. And when you call Tesla's support site, the automated voicemail stuff, in addition to all the wonderful hold music that you get, does tell you if you've received delivery of your car, please allow 24 to 48 hours for activation of your mobile app to work. So I waited a lot longer then, and I kept calling, and they're like, I think we figured it out. It might be a couple more days. And then someone finally told me, actually, we're looking at a couple of weeks before this thing is active. And so that was becoming pretty annoying. I wanted to be able to plug in my car at work, and I wanted to be able to see how I was doing charge-wise so I could decide when and if I needed to move the car. I also wanted to be able to warm it up. It's been very cold here today. And in this past week, it's really starting to get cold. And so I actually did use it at the end of my shift today. I did use the app to sort of heat up my car, which was great. So I'm very happy. It's, with the product, I'm actually really happy with the app. I'm kind of waiting for the option to upgrade to software version 9, which I will do as soon as I'm able to for sure. But nonetheless, still pretty frustrating process waiting, as well as the delivery sort of coordination process was pretty frustrating. And I did put a tweet out last week just saying, that I had spent a lot of time on call. I was just being told different things. And this is an area they really do need to clean up. I think the product is very compelling and the process is not, and certainly needs to get better. I think if you're dealing with people that aren't hardcore Tesla folks that once it's all done, you just don't care anymore. When they're dealing more with people, I would say I put my wife in that category of someone who is just not going to put up with that sort of stuff. If you say something's going to happen, it needs to happen, when you say it's going to happen and in the way that it does, and the product needs to be what you say it is. So, that bothered me a little bit. Not a huge deal. I'm certainly not going to hold it against them. But at the same time, I really hope that they do improve this. And I did tweet that out. I said, this process just isn't good enough. And immediately one of the fudsters that's out there, one of these short seller type accounts just said, even the faithful are starting to doubt now. And I'm like, well, in the same tweet, I said the car was, quote, outstanding, end quote. So it was kind of an interesting experience. First of all, I didn't think any of the fudsters would be following me or paying any attention to what I'm tweeting out there. But I think it's worthwhile as a member of the Tesla community now to point out these things in these areas where they need to improve. This last section, I did want to briefly cover Elon's tweet and his settlement with the SEC. I kind of already mentioned it at the top of the show. I am very concerned about Elon's behavior. I've had this rule dealing with some sort of past work experiences when I still lived in Maryland, where every now and then there'll be someone that just kind of doesn't get it. They're intellectually smart, obviously, and they have some issue, some communication-related issue. And when it's explained to them, they can intellectually understand it, but when it happens, they're not aware that they're doing it. They're not aware that it's happening. Some of you may know people like this. Some of you may have family members like this. It's just frustrating. But then after a while, you realize if they just don't get it, explaining it to them after the fact doesn't really help, because they're unable to recognize when they're either doing the thing that they're not supposed to do or are thinking about doing the thing that they're not supposed to do. And I think this follow-up taunting tweet at the SEC, where he called them the Short Sellers Enrichment Commission, and kind of made fun of what a great job they're doing. Immediately, the podcasting community kind of jumped on him and just was like, "Please stop it." This is, I think, a perfect example. You would think that a $20 million slap on the wrist would get your attention, that would get you to think before you tweet. After the board of directors has presumably said something to him, and they've had to pay $20 million, not personally, but the company has had to pay it. You just cost your company $40 million, and now the job search for a chairman. I think all in all, when this first happened, I think the market responded favorably. I think they thought that this was probably a good thing, that, Musk needed just enough of a slap on the wrist, and the change in structure is something that a lot of corporate investors have been wanting. I do think when you get right down to it, it probably is a conflict of interest to have the CEO be the chairman of the company, or be the chairman of the board. Really, the CEO is supposed to work for the board, and the chairman's supposed to run that. So it's kind of like you're running the committee that's supposed to be overseeing you. So I kind of get how, now that they're a publicly traded company, and maybe that's not the best structure. The question is, who is that person going to be, and then how are they going to interact with Elon? How is he going to respond to whoever this person is when they tell him, presumably if it was a separate chairman of the board and Elon launched this SEC mocking tweet, that person would have called Elon immediately and done something to him. I would assume there would have had to been some sort of discipline or a suspension or something for that. I mean, it's just reckless. There's no reason to go there. That's not where his focus needs to be. And yet, this isn't the first time. This seems to be a pattern, and just seems to be something that he just simply cannot resist. I don't know why. It doesn't really matter why. I mean, I've tried to psychoanalyze Elon before on previous episodes. If you want to go back and listen to some back episodes, I've kind of covered this before. In a later show, I keep teasing this. I just don't have time to really work on this. But I really wonder if this last one might be enough to start really putting together the case that Elon right now is Elon 1.0, in the same way that Steve Jobs, before he was ousted at Apple, was Steve Jobs 1.0. And that he needed that time, he needed that separation, he needed to be sort of kicked out as a growing experience. And then when he came back, he retained his good qualities, worked on the areas that he needed work on, and was able to get the sort of results and behave in a way that worked. I think a lot of people thought that Steve Jobs was a bit of a tyrant to work for, but at the same time, he inspired passion, he inspired hard work, he got results, and he wouldn't let people just settle for something that any other company could do. And I think Elon has those qualities right now, but at the same time, he has what I perceive to be a rather serious character flaw, in that he just can't leave this alone. The company is just about to stand up on its own two legs. The short sellers will have nowhere to run because Model 3 is just running absolutely rampant. So at the same time, on the execution side, that seems to be going okay. On the sort of scheduling and logistics part for delivery, that's not going very well, but that will get better for sure. If he would just continue to work that, let the results speak for themselves so that he doesn't have to tweet and mock people. He should literally give them no credit. As soon as he does this, he gives them more attention than they probably deserve. And in a way, I think he's inflating the issue and making it more pronounced, and more people know about it because he's doing these things. And he just really needs to stop. At some point, I'm still even considering now buying another Tesla. I can't afford it right now, but now that I have one, I'm thinking, I'm starting to see some of the major advantages. We haven't taken a long road trip, but I essentially get free electricity. I get what would be the equivalent of a free tank of gas just by going to work and just plug in. They just happen to provide that. So that's a significant advantage. And so if there was a car that was in the same price range or was close to it, that was a Tesla that would fit my whole family, I would probably get it. Our van's getting pretty long in the tooth and just had some issues, and so we had to get it taken in, had to get a new timing belt, which was like another $1,500, and then it had a dead battery, and they did some other work on it. So, pretty large bill. Teslas don't have timing belts and all that other stuff. So that's just something where immediately I thought, well, this is another way that the car is superior. Anyway, I'm going to try to wrap up this show relatively quick. I've had a very busy week, and in a lot of ways a really great week driving the car. I've put about 500 miles on my Model 3. And I forgot to mention it last time. I was going to say in the show what I was going to name my car. Those of you who may not know this already, it's kind of a thing in the Tesla community to name your car, which you can do on the center screen under the Tesla logo. And I decided to name it what my son had suggested, which was, he wanted to call it Automobile, but it was Otto, like O-T-T-O. And the last name is Mobile. So I just named the car Otto. It was between that or Dark Knight, and I decided to go with what Evan said. So the car's name is Otto, and I've actually been switching it back and forth when he's not in the car. I've been switching it back to Dark Knight, but don't tell him. Anyway, let's try to wrap up the show. And thank you so much for listening this week and every week that you have been. Don't forget, you can reach out to me on email at teslanewstopics@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at teslanewstopics. Music for the show provided by Melodious Thunk. My Tesla referral link is ts.la/Jeff, Jeff 62003. We should be showing up on TuneIn soon. We are also on YouTube. If you want to support the show financially in any amount, you can find us on patreon.com/teslanewstopics. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes. Leave a positive review if you can. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next week.